Hey guys, what's going on? It's Ben here. I am back again today doing another video, and the subject of today's video is going to be on the Eastern Conference predictions that I've come up with for this upcoming 2019 to 2020 season. So before I get kicked off, I will just set a couple of kind of parameters for this video. I'm going to be going from the 15th seed to the 1 seed in the East, so I'm going to be going from worst to best. The top 8 seeds make the playoffs, as most people are aware. Beyond that, I am factoring in things like injuries and things like that. So if I have a team ranked differently than what you might think, maybe it's because of an injury or something like that. And otherwise, I don't really have too much else to say before getting into it. So without further ado, let's do this thing. So starting at number 15, the team that I think will perform the worst in the East this year is definitely the Cleveland Cavaliers. I think that there are other contenders here, but I think the Cavaliers are going to be bad from the standpoint that they have some young talent, which I think is good. They have Darius Garland, they have Colin Sexton, but I really feel like those are 2 point guards, and them drafting Darius Garland feels a lot like when, let's say, the Timberwolves drafted both Johnny Flynn and Ricky Rubio. I don't really think that there's a ton of overlap for these two, and I think that this team's going to realize that relatively early on. I think they went with an approach much like the 76ers did when they took 3 consecutive centers and 3 consecutive drafts with um, Nerlens Noel, Embiid, and Okafor. They're just trying to take the best players available, and that's what the Cavs did, but I think that that fit won't work great. Outside of those two, they have Kevin Love, but even he is past his prime. Not really all-star caliber at this point, just like really good starter. And the rest of the cast doesn't really inspire much hope. You know, you're gonna have Chetty Osman probably starting. Besides that, you know, Tristan Thompson's a good player, but I don't know that he brings enough to the table to really move the meter on this team. Like he's a good player, but he doesn't really influence wins necessarily, in my opinion. So overall, I don't see his team doing very well this year, and it could be a fire sale by midseason of Kevin Love and one of their young dudes between Sexton and Garland, maybe to a team that needs a point guard more. At 14, I have the Washington Wizards finishing 25 and 57. Similar thing for the Wizards as the Cavaliers, sort of. Like they have one really marquee player, Bradley Beal. Like the Cavs have Kevin Love, but I just don't like anything on this roster besides Bradley Beal. Isaiah Thomas, I think, is going to maybe average 12 points a game inefficiently. You know, like optimistically, he'll shoot 40% from the field. Besides that, Rui Hashimura, I think, is the rookie's name who they have. I'm not totally inspired by him yet. I think he's kind of going to be like what Kevin Knox was last year, like a guy that people think has promise, but he's still rough around the edges. Besides that, Thomas Bryant, I think, is an NBA backup, and I think he's only starting on Washington because they're so devoid of talent. Beyond that, you know, I don't really see much on this roster to like. Ish Smith is a backup point guard who they're going to slot in as a starter, so that's not really good. But if this team trades Bradley Beal, they are probably the worst team in the East, but I'm just putting them here based on the fact that he'll probably be there until midseason, I'd say. At 13, I have the Hornets finishing 27 and 55. I think the Hornets are probably the trendiest team to pick to be the worst in the East. I don't think that they'll be as bad as people are thinking. And you know, most people have them around 23 wins. I think that's where Vegas has them. I have them at 27. I think that people aren't accounting for the fact that, um, you know, with Kemba, this was always around like a 40-win team. Without him, they are going to be worse. I mean, obviously, I have them at 27, but I think they still have a good crop of like quality vets. Between guys like Nicholas Batum, Cody Zeller, Frank Kaminsky, Malik Monk, Miles Bridges, Terry Rozier. I think those are all guys who are at least average NBA players, and I think when you just play the law of averages on a given night, some of those average NBA players are going to perform relatively well for themselves, and I think because of those reasons that the Hornets are going to win a couple of games just based on their guys having good experience and being definitely being professionals and having played in the league for a while. I think that can get you some wins, just that in and of itself, not being a young or inexperienced team. Next, at the 12 seed, I have the New York Knicks finishing 33 and 49. I think this is a very fair assessment of the Knicks. I think they're very similar to the Hornets, but just sub in that the vets that they have are better in that you got guys like Julius Randle, Taj Gibson, Bobby Portis, a pretty good trio right there, along with a young Mitchell Robinson. I like R.J. Barrett. I think he'll be inefficient his rookie year, but I think he'll grow. Kevin Knox is a decent supporting piece as a forward. Dennis Smith Jr. Like R.J. Barrett, inefficient, but he'll grow. They've got a lot of guys that are starter caliber, but they don't have a lot of guys that are like carry a team caliber. So that puts them in a weird spot, and I think they'll have probably like about 6 guys averaging between 12 to 15 points a night, but they won't have like one guy averaging 20 plus. So they'll have a lot of guys that are capable, but not one guy that can step up and lead them. So I think that hinders them quite a bit and leaves them at the 12 seed. At the 11 seed, I have the Bulls at 36 and 46. I expect some moderate to good progression from each of their young guys between Zach LaVine, Lauri Markkanen, and Wendell Carter. Also, Chris Dunn hopefully progresses a little bit too. Still a relatively young player. I think he's going to be 24, 25 this season. Kobe White's going to start over him, but I think Chris Dunn will be probably one of the best backups in the league. Besides that, they brought in Thad Young, who I think is a pretty strong addition, a good veteran who is not going to steal the show from anybody, but he just will provide enough to help this team, I think, shore up some weak points, like not things that even will show up in the box score, but just a guy with good basketball intelligence, a good feel for the game, and um, he just can help develop young players. I think similar to what was going on in Indiana. I think there were some young dudes there like Sabonis, Miles Turner, and Oladipo, who I think he was a good veteran presence for. I think that's what the Bulls' idea was in bringing him in. So yeah, I feel relatively good about the Bulls. Not a playoff team, but will show progression this year. At the 10 seed, I have what I think will be actually one of the most exciting teams in the East, despite their record, which will be the Atlanta Hawks. They've got a really nice young plethora of players between Trae Young, um, John Collins, Kevin Herter, Cam Reddish, R.J. Hunter. That's a really nice group of 5 dudes right there. And outside of that, they've got Jabari Parker still, who I think he's going to be a sixth man on this team, and he's still 24, believe it or not, which is very young. And I think really the only thing that this team is missing, if they want to play Collins at the 4, is a good starting center. I don't like Alex Lynn at all. I think that's a weak point for him to be a starting center. I'd love for this team to acquire Steven Adams because I feel like he's a dude who's still 25. He's still young enough to play well with this core. And they don't have a ton of salary cap locked up with anybody, so I think that he could be an addition that wouldn't hurt them financially necessarily either, considering that all their guys are still on rookie deals. Um, so yeah, I like this team a lot. They'll have a lot of young, interesting players, but still very inexperienced players who will struggle through parts of the season. At the 9 seed, I have the Pistons at 39 and 43. I just Word just came out recently that Blake Griffin will miss some time at the beginning of the season. That's why I knocked them down a notch here than what I had them at. I like the core, but without Blake, this team is floundering. And they had some good veteran additions between Michael Beasley, Markieff Morris, Joe Johnson, and Derrick Rose. But I don't know if the sum of the parts is greater than the whole sort of thing. I think they're going to struggle without their main man Blake. At 8, I have the Magic at 41 and 41. Basically a carbon copy of last year's team. You're going to have the dudes like Vucevic, Aaron Gordon, Terrence Ross, Evan Fournier. Those are your main guys of this team, which in a weak East is good enough for a playoff spot. The thing to watch for this team is what Markelle Fultz is like this year. We don't really know what to expect, and we'll have to keep tuning in to see what goes on. At the 7th seed, I have the Pacers. I think this is the team that people are the most varied on. I've heard some people say 3 seed. I've heard some people say 14 seed. I'm kind of striking a balance there and putting them at the 7. They played pretty well without Oladipo down the stretch last year. Although they lost who you could argue was their best player during that time in Bogdanovich, and they also lost Thad Young. They did bring in TJ Warren for basically nothing, like a second round pick, I think. And then they also brought in Malcolm Brogdon, which I think was a good pickup. And they also lost Tyreek Evans, but he had a pretty bad year for them. So I think that kind of negates itself. So yeah, this team is going to be primarily on the shoulders of Miles Turner, Sabonis, T.J. Warren, Jeremy Lamb, and Malcolm Brogdon to carry this team through until Oladipo gets back, whenever that is. I think they're going to float around 500 for most of the season, and then when Oladipo comes back, get a slight uptick. But yeah, that's why I have them at the 7 seed, because I think that Bogdanovich, T.J. Warren, relatively comparable. Malcolm Brogdon basically makes up for the loss of Thad Young and Tyreek Evans, in my opinion. 6th seed, I have the Heat at 44 and 38. I think a lot of people want to put them a lot higher, but I think this is a team where they're bringing back basically everybody except adding, or basically they traded Hassan Whiteside for Jimmy Butler, really, if you want to look at their major offseason moves. And I think although Hassan hasn't had a huge impact on the team as of late, I don't think Jimmy Butler really adds all that much as far as um, a winning addition to this team. What I mean by that is, um, I think Jimmy is just gonna end up in the same situation he was on with the Bulls 3 years ago, where he's on a team that's gonna float around the 6, 7, or 8 seed. He's gonna be really the only star player on the team with a few good, decent supporting pieces. Like on the Bulls, it was an aging D Wade. On this team, it's gonna be a Goran Dragic. And I don't see them any higher than 6 and a first round out. Okay, at the 5, I have the Brooklyn Nets at 46 and 36. I really like the additions, even though Durant will miss this entire year. I really like the additions of Kyrie over D'Lo. I think he's a better player. And I think DeAndre Jordan's an underrated signing. He has lost some steam in the past couple of years, but he's still good for about 12 and 12 on any given night. Yeah, so I like those additions quite a bit. Besides that, Karis LeVert's still a very good player. So I still generally like the makeup of this team. You still got Spencer Dinwiddie, who's good. Um, Jared Allen's still there. They still got a lot of nice young pieces, even though they lost D'Lo. They brought in Taurean Prince. They still got Joe Harris. So a lot of nice young players still that they got to work with. Um, at the 4 seed, I have the Raptors. Some people may think this is way too high. I got the Raptors at 47 and 35. I still think that they're going to be a pretty good team. They had a really good record last year without Kawhi. And they did lose Kawhi and Danny Green, so wing depth is going to be an issue. They brought in Rondae Hollis-Jefferson, who I assume will be playing mostly small forward, even though he got used to more power forward. I think they're bringing him in to try and replace some of what Kawhi brought defensively. They'll probably have OG Anunoby starting, I would assume, at the small forward, unless they shift Norman Powell there. My thoughts are going to be that Van Fleet is going to be a starting shooting guard, which I don't really like him as a starter. I like him more as a 6-man plug and play, but they might have to start him. Kyle Lowry, a year older, but I think he'll still bring some punch to the team, like 16 points, 8 assists a game. Gasol, Ibaka, Pascal will all still be good players. From Ibaka and Gasol, you can probably guess they're going to both average around 15 points, 8 rebounds a night. And Siakam, you're going to hope he averages around 20 to 22 and 10 rebounds and 5 assists, but that might be a lot to ask for him. He did just sign a max extension, so we'll have to see. 3 seed, I have the Celtics at 48 and 34. Essentially, this offseason, they traded Al Horford for Enes Kanter, and they traded Kemba for Kyrie. So I think Kemba replaces about 90% of what Kyrie brings, and I think the real hurt on this team is going to be defensively, where besides losing Al Horford and bringing in Kanter, they also lost Marcus Morris. Those two were pretty good defenders. The interior defense is going to struggle. There's nothing more to say to it. So I think beyond that, they're going to see some development from the young dudes between Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. I hope so. And I still think that they have the makings of a pretty good roster here, so I have them at the 3 seed. At the 2, I have Philadelphia finishing 57 and 25. They essentially, how I keep saying what they essentially brought in and lost, they essentially lost Butler and JJ Redick and brought in Josh Richardson and Al Horford. There'll be a lot less of a pace team. They'll be a lot slower with Embiid and Horford presumably playing a lot of the games together. They'll still have decent spacing, which I think is an issue, but Richardson, Al Horford can shoot it decent. Tobias Harris can shoot decent. He shot like 40% from three the last 2 years. Um, Embiid, not a great shooter, but for a center, he's a good spacer. So yeah, I think that this team's still going to do really well. Ben Simmons should be improved from last year. Hopefully, the jump shot starts working for him. And Embiid's just going to grow as a player, and physically he seems a lot better. He said he's lost a lot of weight, like baby fat weight that he had in the offseason. So, maybe he's a lot less injury prone and a lot healthier. So, because, even last year when he was healthy, relatively speaking, he still missed 18 games. But it'd be interesting to see this year. What if Embiid plays 70 plus games? We haven't necessarily ever seen a fully healthy Joel Embiid yet, so who knows what that could bring? Could wreak chaos on the East or havoc. And at the 1 seed at 58-24, I have the Bucks again as the 1 seed this year, repeating from last year. They lost some major pieces in Brogdon and Nikola Mirotic, and they also lost somebody else that I can't think of right now, but somebody who I thought was relatively key. For some reason, my mind's just blanking, but somebody off the bench. Well, regardless, they brought in Wes Matthews, they brought in Robin Lopez to sort of replace the guys that went out the door. They brought back George Hill. I think they still have a good team. I think they're still going to be a very viable playoff contender. And, they brought in Kyle Lowry, too, to replace some of that Mirotic shooting. But I still have some concerns as far as I think that Wes Matthews is less reliable than Brogdon, and I think he's a downgrade. And I think Mirotic was better than what Robin Lopez will bring to the team. And I think Cal Korver will be decent in spots, but he's still going to be a marginal player on this team, honestly, at like 38 years old now. So, I think they remained at the relative same level, but they'll just be slightly worse, and that spacing will be a little bit worse. And they got a little bit older this offseason, too. There you have it, guys. Those are my predictions for the Eastern Conference standings. Hope you enjoyed the video. Leave your thoughts below if you have any, and I'll see you next time. Bye.